December 27, 2017 at 422 am. In a study published by the Begin Zardit Center for Strategic Studies in Israel, Mordecai Kedar has outlined a 10-part vision for peace with Saudi Arabia. The vision outlines a plan that would include few concessions for Israel. Presenting the study, Kedar, if Saudis want to live in peace with Israel, then Israel will accept peace in return, but this is all they will receive. It will not be a peace agreement of any other kind. If they do not want peace under these conditions, then no peace will be discussed. Quote. He added that, Israel must be very cautious about the joint defense agreement with the Saudis. In January 1991, Riyadh did not respect the joint defense pact signed with Iraq and actually worked against its implementation. Over the past 7 years, Saudi Arabia has proved to turn a blind eye to Arab and Islamic blood, which is shed in Syria and Yemen, and therefore it is difficult to believe that the spilling of Jewish blood will be met with a different reaction. Since the establishment of the kingdom, self-interest has been the Al Saud family's main priority in any sensitive issue. It is difficult for Israel to imagine a scenario in which the Saudi army goes to war to protect Israel unless the war directly affects Saudi interests, he said. Accordingly, there is no point in relying on the joint defense charter with Riyadh. Read more. Saudi Crown Prince invited to visit Israel. Kedar highlighted that the other details go in the same vein of peace for peace, recognition for recognition, and natural relations for natural relations. The old days when Israel used to pay, in hard currency, for parts of its hard-earned territory, are over, and we are no longer ready to lose more just for a paper bearing the word peace. He stressed that, when Israel held its agreements with Jordan and Egypt, its ignorance of the culture of negotiation in the Middle East led to serious mistakes, which is the thing that should be avoided with Saudi Arabia or any Arab or Islamic country wishing to enter into peace relations with Israel. Kedar introduced 10 key tips to help Israel negotiate with the Saudis in an insightful manner. First, Israel should realize that the Saudis do not really want peace with Israel. If they wanted to, they could have joined Anwar Sadat in 1979 or King Hussein of Jordan in 1994. However, all that they want is Israel's help in confronting their great enemy, Iran, now and in the future. Saudis would not have thought about peace with Israel if the Iranian threat did not exist. Once this threat ends, and even if the price is the outbreak of a war between Israel and Iran, which will cost Israel material and human losses, there is no evidence that confirms the continuation of peaceful relations between Saudi Arabia and Jerusalem. Read more. How long before the Israeli flag flies over Riyadh? Second, emphasizing that Israel will not go anywhere, for it has been a permanent member of the international community for 70 years without the need for peace with Saudi Arabia. Its membership will remain for another 7,000 years without this peace agreement. It has plenty of time, and there is no reason for peace with Saudi Arabia or the UAE because it will not solve the problems of the Middle East. Just like the peace agreement with Egypt and Jordan that did not contribute to finding any solutions to the problems of the Middle East. Third, emphasizing that peace with Saudi Arabia should not be linked to any other issue, especially the Palestinian case. In 1974, at Camp David, Israeli Prime Minister Begin made a huge mistake when he agreed upon Palestinian self-rule, which paved the way for the establishment of the Palestinian Authority that turned into a terrorist entity in Gaza and could also lead to the emergence of another terrorist entity on the hills of the West Bank. Read more. Mysterious death of Saudi officer at Ritz-Carlton Hotel. Fourth, stressing that if the Saudis insist on addressing the Palestinian case, Israel's response to any peace agreement must be the following: if you really want to help the Palestinians, build them cities and villages in Saudi Arabia. Israel would be happy to share its experience in building new housing communities for the development of the local economy and infrastructure for the welfare of the population. Fifth, Israel's recognition of Al Saud system in Mecca and Medina, although the family's roots are not from the Hijaz, but from the mountains of Najd, depends on Saudi recognition of Israel's right to have Jerusalem as a historic and eternal capital, and it will. He stressed that Israel will recognize Saudi Arabia as an Islamic state in exchange for Saudi recognition of Israel as a Jewish state. Israel will recognize the right of the Saud family to live anywhere in Saudi Arabia in return for Saudi recognition of the inalienable right of Jews to live in Israel from sea to river. He stressed that Israel will not allow the incitement on Saudi Arabia in the Israeli media in return for not allowing Saudi Arabia to spread incitement on Israel through its own media. This will interestingly include Al Jazeera channel in case Qatar join the negotiations with Israel. Sixth, Israel will allow the Saudis to establish the Israeli embassy in Saudi Arabia where they wish, provided that the Saudis agree to place their embassy where the Israelis wish, namely in Jerusalem. Read more. Bahrain sentences 6 to death for assassination plot. Seventh, the Israeli and Saudi parties shall be committed not to vote against each other in international organizations and institutions, while both countries have the right to abstain if they wish. Eighth, emphasizing the need for Europeans and Americans to stay away from the negotiation table between Saudi Arabia and Israel because they are not involved in this agreement and will not have to bear the consequences of its failure, for their interests not necessarily correspond to Israel's. Ninth, putting emphasis on the rejection of international guarantees even if it was introduced by one of Israel's best friends in exchange for giving up something the Saudis want. 10th, emphasizing that peace with Israel is not merely a truce accompanied by a peace document. Israel has to insist on peace, a complete normalization, which includes cultural, tourism, trade, industrial, technical, scientific, technological, sports, and academic relationships. If Israel participates in the international events held in Saudi Arabia, Israel's flag will have to be raised high alongside the flags of other countries. If Israel wins any sports competition in Saudi Arabia, the Israeli national anthem will be performed. Books and Israeli products shall also be displayed at international exhibitions in the Saudi Kingdom. Regarding the security situation, the study stressed that the two parties must pledge not to provide assistance to any other country working against them, and the obligation not to transfer information to those parties or enter their territory, while emphasizing that Israel will not attack any country in the world that does not constitute a direct threat to it.